Microsoft. In my day job, I'm a principal program manager for Java on Azure. I'm wearing a little bit of a different hat for this particular talk, though. Primarily, I actually intentionally have sort of spun this talk in the Jakarta ambassadors direction, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what that is. Either way, my contact information is on the slide. Obviously, one of the reasons I'm here and trying to deliver this talk is to connect with you. In fact, that's probably one of the key characteristics of this talk. So this talk is the third rendition. This is about the third rendition of this talk. I've delivered several different variations of this talk over the years. This time it's Contributor's Guide to the Jakarta E12 Galaxy. As you probably already know, Jakarta E11 is not here yet. Actually, by the time, when I drafted this talk, I was expecting Jakarta E11 to have been delivered. It's not yet, but it will be very soon. And this, as you can imagine, as a result, is a forward-looking talk. And it has a couple of different purposes. And there's a reason why it's Jakarta EE ambassadors, and purposely Jakarta ambassadors are not simply on behalf of Microsoft. And Microsoft, as you may know, is a part of the working group. So one purpose of this talk is actually somewhat user-centric, right? In other words, the intention of this talk is to talk about the possibilities of what may happen in the future as an end user, a developer that's using Jakarta EE applications, and you might one day develop Jakarta E12. But the core of this talk actually is intended for the purpose of helping make Jakarta E12 a reality, in making sure that the people that actually need to do the work to make the thing happen are the people that show up. And I'll explain to you in a moment why that is, right? And why, especially with the transition from the Java EE to Jakarta EE, why this particular element is actually pretty critical. So I think most of folks here and most of people watching this talk in recording probably know some of this stuff, so I'm going to quickly breeze it over, primarily for the benefit of the odd individual that may be watching this video or just simply do not know what all this stuff is about. So I'll quickly breeze over these, but we'll get into the meat of the matter very quickly, so no worries there. So what is Jakarta EE? Jakarta EE is formerly, the technology essentially formerly known as Java EE, right? Moved from the JCP, where the Java language and all of the good stuff in the JDK continues to be developed. Whereas Jakarta EE a few years ago moved to the Eclipse Foundation. Now it's not about just moving A to B, and as such, we all had our doubts whether this move, how it was actually going to work out. Because it is very fair to say that this is probably one of the largest technology transfers that has happened perhaps ever, and certainly in the Java ecosystem. So there was a lot of things that could have gone wrong with that, right? But thankfully, we are where we are at the moment. We've actually had several releases of Jakarta EE now. There's reason to believe that this has worked out, right? So there's some key characteristics why that is. Some differences as well, right? So other than it's not simply moving for the sake of moving, right? One of the critical things that we try to accomplish in the move from the JCP to the Eclipse Foundation is that it is a bit more vendor neutral. And going to the theme of this talk, something that a lot of people have say in, right? There's a way of much more easily contributing. The reality of the JCP is, and I worked in the JCP for many years as a contributor. Reality of the JCP is it's difficult to contribute as an individual or a smaller company. Whereas in this structure, really everything is in equal footing. So at least in theory, all of us should be able to contribute a little bit easier. Now, one of the things that I was very worried about is whether we're going to lose people in the process, and that has definitely not happened, right? So majority of the key stakeholders, at least nominally speaking, still are part of the working group, and in fact, the working group is growing, right? One of the most pleasant surprises that I had, I guess, a few weeks ago, is Alibaba joined. I don't know how many people know about this, but Alibaba is actually a pretty significant technology player, certainly in China. So the fact that they are now joining this working group all is saying that there's something here, right, that is working, and we need to strengthen it further forward. But to be honest, the key thing that I want you to take away from this slide is one of the intentions we all had when we did this move from the JCP to Jakarta EE is the observation that JCP, at least development under the JCP, was largely very Oracle driven. one of the hopes of moving to the Eclipse Foundation was that it was going to be less single vendor driven and in fact will be more vibrant. So this is the heart of this whole thing. Is like without continued contribution from key vendors and new contributions from end users, from small companies, from small organizations, it's going to be difficult for that to say we succeeded, right? And I don't know if we really have yet, right, to be honest. I think there's some signs we're on the path to success, but the success really will come from, you watching this video or you attending the talk today and making the decision that you need to make a difference, either you as an individual or maybe your company. So let's move forward a little bit. A lot of people, one of the things I want to reinforce, in this talk is thinking about the fact that a lot of people really discount Jakarta EE still. They discounted Java EE and they discount Jakarta EE certainly. The reality, it's one of those technologies that it may not be very hot in, if you look at social media. But the reality is, and believe me, I see this on a day-to-day basis in my day job. There's just a very large install base of this technology, and a lot of people that are still hoping that this technology has a future and is competitive and is moving forward. So none of that install base is going anywhere, right? And at least there's some evidence points to say there are some people that are actively using this technology, even in a public fashion. So one of the key bits of information that I'd like to take a look at is Jakarta EE Developer Survey, and as you can see from the numbers here, at least at face value, there seems to be something here, right? There seems to be a core set of users that very much are dependent on this technology. And even the folks that do not consider themselves necessarily Jakarta EE developers, and I think with the namespace transition, a lot of people have figured this out. Even if you're using something that you don't actually consider Jakarta EE, whether that's Quarkus or Microprofile or Spring Boot, well, guess what? You're actually a Jakarta EE developer. And this is not an accident, right? This is one of those foundational technologies that if it does not remain vibrant, it's going to be harder for the Java as an ecosystem to remain relevant. So very, very important technology set, however you want to look at it. So again, I'll breeze this over real quick. We are obviously way ahead of all of the JCP days, and I was surprisingly involved in the J2EE 1.4 days onwards. It's been quite a few years for me personally. But now under Jakarta EE and Eclipse Foundation, there's been at least 3 successful releases, hopefully a 4th very soon. So just to give you, again, a little bit of context setting, Jakarta EE 8 basically is binary compatible with Java EE 8. The main thing there is to make the transfer happen, so not a lot of code changes happen there. Then we needed to get away from the Javax namespace to avoid collision with continued development in the JCP. So that happened in 9.9 and 9.1. Then we had Jakarta EE 10, which actually did have new features and new APIs, often, as you can imagine, long pending things. And then, of course, we now have Jakarta EE 11, hopefully very, very soon. And that, again, will include new features, new APIs, and in this case, actually, one new specification. Was hoping for a few more than that, but at least there's one net new specification there. I'm going to skip this over largely, right? And the main point here is to understand that although Jakarta EE forms the core of the ecosystem, there's a lot of innovation that takes place outside of Jakarta EE per se, right? Jakarta itself is moving, as we discussed, but the whole ecosystem is also moving. And the idea has always been that it's a symbiotic relationship. The ecosystem is always going to be a little bit ahead of the standard, but the idea is, the people that are driving that innovation will bring the innovation back into the standard. And it's sort of, as I said, a symbiotic relationship that moves forward together. Okay, so now I need to talk to you about the Jakarta EE Contributors Guide. And this is, just as this talk has gone through several renditions, this contributor guide that I am showing you a link to, that has also gone through several renditions. In fact, probably by December timeframe, once Jakarta EE 11 is out, we will put out, the ambassadors together will put out a Jakarta EE 12 version of this guide. And in fact, the talk that I'm delivering now is sort of a forward look ahead of what that contributor guide might look like. So the URL is going to be out of date soon. We're not going to be taking the 11 contributor guide down for sure. The Jakarta 10 contributor guide remains exactly where it was, and so will this, but there will be a Jakarta 12 contributor guide, and the URL will look very, very similar. Now, what I need to do is explain to you what the intent of this contribution guide was. Remember when I showed you the history graph, we all knew that this was going to happen. This transition from the JCP to Eclipse Foundation was going to take some time. And within the ambassadors, our primary concern was that in the Java EE timeframe, we actually had a relatively good idea of what our backlog looked like, meaning because this is a standard thing, standards take time, right? They can't just overnight standardize stuff. So we always had an idea of what exactly needs to go in the standard. And since we knew there was going to be a gap between Java E8 to whatever the new version was going to be that's going to deliver new features, primarily, I'm being very forthright to read that the reason we put together this guide is to ensure that that work that went into thinking about what actually belongs in the standard doesn't just get lost in the woods, right? So to be truthful, this continues to remain a function of this contributor guide as well, right? To make sure that those backlog items that we as the ambassadors recognize don't just vanish into thin air. Now, briefly, if you don't know what the Jakarta ambassadors are, this is formerly the Java EE Guardians, right? So we are basically a grassroots group of people that try to advance this technology forward, right? Just as we try to do with Java EE when things were especially not really going very well. Thankfully, we're not there yet, as I mentioned, but we're not out of the woods yet either. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about so given that we had this contributor guide, right, and we had this essentially from the Java E8 days onward, one thing you can do is you can evaluate and put these releases that we had, the feature releases that actually contain changes, you can put those things in context, right? Because what we can do is you can lay out the things that we knew about in the roadmap, and then you can superimpose what actually was done, what we believe is mostly on the way, and what remains a gap, right? So in this slide here, this is precisely what I'm doing, right? So I'm showing you, relative to the things that were in the contributor guide, essentially continuing on from Java E8, what are the things that were delivered? Well, quite a few, right? The asynchronous annotation was delivered. We had better CDI support in batch. We had some concurrency semantics that actually got standardized in the Jakarta EE concurrency. We were waiting for a Bootstrap API for REST. That happened, and so on, right? So there's quite a few things actually that happened in Jakarta EE 10. In general, it's a solid release. It's not, it would have been nicer if a whole bunch of this stuff was actually just vanished and was all green or blue, right? But that's not the case. But nonetheless, a fair bit of green if you look at this slide deck. So this was a good solid release, all in all. Certainly, it closed out a bunch of the gaps that we were looking for. Similarly, you can look at Jakarta EE 11 in that same context. So obviously, there's going to be fewer things here because we've delivered on certain things that we were hoping was going to make it into Jakarta EE 10. So the list is going to be a little bit shorter, and in fact, the dream is that there is no list, right? There's only a small amount of things that, we don't even have to identify that there is a backlog. But fewer things in Jakarta EE 10, since Jakarta EE 11, since Jakarta EE 10 delivered a few things. This is how the picture looks like, most likely is going to look like when Jakarta EE 11 is delivered. It's really, they're putting the final touches on TCK, implementation details, and so on. Not a lot of this will change. This is a pretty accurate view of things as they stand, right? So again, a few important things that happened. The schedule annotation happened, for example. That's yet another nail in the coffin of EJB, because you could only use the @schedule annotation in EJB and nowhere else. The better CDI support for REST hasn't really happened yet. Right? We hope to happen in the future. Persistence and concurrency certainly has much better CDI alignment. The persistence one is particularly important, actually. And that's another mechanism where you can actually begin to use CDI in a way that you couldn't before, and you had to use EJB. A bunch of the specifications actually adapted to Java SE records, and this was an important thing. We knew this was going to be a game changer, and we knew a lot of developers will want to use this. So it's good that a lot of the specifications actually have adapted to it. Similar for virtual threads, right? For the virtual threads, the basic thing that was supposed to happen in the standard happened, right? In other words, Jakarta concurrency actually adopted virtual threads. What has yet to actually happen is the runtimes themselves adopting virtual threads as an alternative thread pooling mechanism altogether. That is yet to be seen. But at least from a standards perspective, pretty good progress, and so on and so forth. One of the nicest thing actually that happened that definitely is a success is deprecating a lot of the old stuff, right? And we knew there was a lot of cruft in the platform that needed to be ultimately removed because they're either been replaced or the technology just isn't relevant anymore. So a lot of that actually did happen. So very good story in terms of the deprecation and removal to streamline the platform and modernize it. Not a lot of new specs, right? That's what I really mean by the innovation. That's what we mean by the innovation bucket there. But at least one made it through, right? And namely the repository specification. And I believe that is going to be probably one of the most sort of important, interesting parts of Jakarta 11. So what this brings us to, so all in all, not bad, not a bad picture in terms of Jakarta 11. Certainly there's some key things that, again, we've had it in the backlog for a long time. Some of it went away. But in net, if you do the math, it's actually less, right? So it's a smaller release compared to Jakarta E10 and perhaps a small release in the history of Jakarta E in general, right? But nonetheless important, right? We're all happy, we're all look forward to it, but relatively modest release. As a result, you don't actually have that many things that go away, right? So there is a bunch of stuff, and this is what we'll talk about in the remainder of the talk. Talk a little bit about what actually these things are. So in terms of CDI alignment, what we fundamentally mean there is making it possible so that you don't have to use EJB anymore. All of the stuff that was interesting in EJB, you can use CDI to do that, right? That's a very important message in terms of being able to say, hey, this is not your grandfather's J2E anymore. This is a very different technology set. In terms of the fundamental component model has shifted, right, from EJB to CDI. But there's things that we need to do in order to get there. So we need these specific things, and I'll talk to you in particular what these are. So some new annotations in concurrency that will allow for basically redoing or essentially making these features available in CDI land. Removing the need for using message-driven beans, and message-driven beans actually was at some point very popular, right? It probably still is in terms of a lot of the code bases. So making a CDI-centric alternative to that. Roles allowed run as, if you're using any kind of declarative security in Jakarta E, that's the one you're going to wind up using. So making that available outside of EJB as well is important. We've been looking for a long time so a little bit of history. Dependency injection was invented, if you will, in Jakarta REST, or back then it was called JAX-RS, before CDI was actually included in the platform. So because of this odd situation, there's actually literally an injection annotation and its own injection mechanism built into JAX-RS called the add context. That actually doesn't make any sense anymore. It's just one of those one-off things that you go, okay, we're using add inject everywhere else. Why are we using this add context thing here? And of course, the JAX-RS folks and Jakarta REST folks have been working on this for a while. They keep saying they're going to deprecate it. I hope it actually happens in Jakarta E12, or hopefully you can help make that happen. Similarly, there's a few things in concurrency. I'll talk a little bit about what the gaps are with regards to CDI alignment. There's a bunch of stuff that can happen in terms of making the platform better adopt and be better aligned to Java SE or the Java language itself. One of the big ones that's a really unfortunate miss is while a bunch of the specs actually did adopt Jakarta or Java SE records, namely bean validation, Jakarta persistence, and so on, one of the ones that was a miss was JSON binding. So you can't actually use Jakarta records with JSON binding right now, and you won't be able to in Jakarta 11 either. So I hope this is a gap that we're going to close very soon, or you can help us close very soon, perhaps even before Jakarta 12 is a release, because this is a small amount of work. It wouldn't take that long to fix this problem. Bootstrap APIs is another important thing. Not every single technology in Jakarta needs to be used you don't need an application server to run every single Jakarta API. In fact, as ambassadors, our objective is to have less and less technologies that are only available in the platform. So one of these ones is JMS. It makes a whole lot of sense to actually just spin up a JMS container. And this has been in the backlog for a long time, is to have a Bootstrap API just for messaging. Similarly, there's a lot of people that want to bootstrap a Java EE container in an SE environment. There's various good reasons to do that. One of the very good reasons is in an IDE, right? So if you can bootstrap a Java SE container right from public static void main, that means you don't actually need a specialized IDE plugin to use Jakarta EE anymore, because you can just say right-click run as, and it's going to run as a Java SE application. Similarly, there's other things that are important in terms of closing standardization gaps. These are basically things that are available elsewhere. You can do it in certain ways, but not in a standards-based fashion. Some of these are, for example, you can't actually create a batch job configuration without using XML. Well, this doesn't make any sense. It's very yesteryear. It's very 90s anymore. You ought to be able to do that in Java. So that work could be done. It's actually done in the, if you will, unofficial RI. The Red Hat's implementation actually allows you to do this. JWT alignment has been pending for a long time. We do have microprofile JWT, so there is a way of using JWT in Jakarta EE-ish applications, but the problem here is that you cannot use it with something like, let's say, OpenID Connect, right? Because OpenID Connect resides in Jakarta EE, whereas JWT supports resides in microprofile, and they don't actually mesh together that well. Similarly, there's other things that could be deprecated, right? There's things that we could definitely remove very easily. Application client container is one of them. Hardly anyone uses that. Really, the primary use case for it is EJB remoting. So not a whole lot of people using EJB remoting, so there's no actual need for the application client container. This could be deprecated. Similarly, deprecating EJB would be a very good thing to do, or at least announcing our intent to deprecate EJB, let's say by Jakarta E12. And of course, the innovation bucket, most important one being configuration. And I'll try to talk a little bit about configuration in a moment. So these are so now let's deep dive into each of the, in the remaining 20 minutes or so, what I'm going to try to do is do a deep dive on each of the specifications and talk a little bit about per specification, what is the remaining work that could be done, right? Is identified gaps that we more or less all agree on. In fact, we have agreed upon, as I mentioned, for a long time now. So in terms of Jakarta concurrency, one of the nice things you can do is have a modernized version of the @lock annotation. If you're not deep into EJB, I'll explain to you in a moment in an example what I mean by that. Adding a max concurrency annotation, I think you can kind of figure out by name what this thing is supposed to do. I'll explain what the use case is in a moment. It's best actually explained in the context of another component type. This one I'll describe right away. So when you spin up a new managed thread in Jakarta, guess what? One of the things you will lose is your CDI context. So if you had a CDI session bean and you spun out and you're creating a new thread, well, you're going to lose that entire context altogether, because CDI context propagation just isn't there. It doesn't happen. So this is one of the gaps. Okay. So this is how EJB lock annotation, EJB does have a lock annotation in it. You can only use it with singleton session beans. Semantically, it looks exactly like this. So you could break it out into its own annotation and allow it to be usable wherever you may have a CDI bean, just like this one, right? So you could create an applications code bean that actually had thread safety semantics built into it, because we're saying that every method that's in this component is going to be by default of type lock read, or it could be read write, right? Either way, either one of those could make sense in that context. Whereas the thing that are actually mutating state, where you want the semantic lock to be applied, right? Those methods could be annotated with lock write. Okay, very interesting stuff, useful stuff. It's a useful bit of functionality. One of the things that really worries me is Jakarta messaging, right? So Jakarta messaging, or JMS, used to be the de facto way you do messaging in Java applications, right? If you said messaging in Java, the one that immediately popped into your mind for many years would be JMS. Not so much anymore. Okay, these days when we're talking with Java developers, what are they using? They're using Kafka. And one of the reasons is we haven't done a revision of Jakarta messaging for many years now, essentially not since Java EE. So in order to make the thing relevant, you need to rev it, right? There needs to be innovation, there needs to be revisions. So this is actually a rather important one. So if you are so inclined, if you're in a position to do so, consider helping evolve this important specification, because it has promise. It was once a very relevant API. It could be in the future as well. What are the changes that are needed here? Well, this could be a mechanism for essentially obsoleting message-driven beans. I'll show you an example of that in a moment. You can have basically a light version. One of the biggest problems with JMS that we observe is that it has a lot of craft, right? There's a lot of functionality that just doesn't make sense in a cloud-native environment anymore. And more things could be added to it, right? So there's an opportunity of basically creating sort of a new vision for what Jakarta messaging could look like by creating a lighter version. That basically removes all the old stuff and adds some more interesting new things that make sense in a cloud-native environment. Bootstrap API, yeah, this is another obvious one. I'll show you an example of how it might look like. Another one that we believe, remember, all of this stuff is, at least some of it is my opinion, but it's also collective opinion of a bunch of different people. So one of the ones that actually could make sense is making Jakarta messaging implementations a little bit less so focused on Java. And the way you do that is that you basically standardize the language that Jakarta messaging implementation speaks. And in this case, well, there happens to be a standard for that. It's called AMQP. You could apply the AMQP standard and say, okay, a Jakarta messaging implementation under the hood as a protocol will speak AMQP. Okay, this is what I mean by how a modern take on message-driven beans might look like. Now, over here, basically there's the max concurrency annotation example, right? So basically what you're saying is, okay, this message consumer, this declarative message consumer, will only consume 10 messages at a time, right? Because its max concurrency throttle is 10. You could similarly apply the same type of annotation in your declarative services to have some kind of basically thread safety mechanism so you don't get overrun by threads. You can see that I'm envisioning this to just be, we're envisioning this just to be a CDI scoped bean. And you could have some nice syntactic sugar right around this, right? You could do automatic payload on unwrapping, right? And you could have interesting things like apply retry delays, have a dead letter queue, maybe do batch processing of messages as opposed to single concurrent messages or what have you, right? So there's a lot of interesting semantic things you can do once you get away from sort of the old EJB model and sort of re-envision how a message consumer for Jakarta EE could look like. This is an example of how a Bootstrap API could look like. So, using something like this, you ought to be able to just bootstrap Jakarta messaging, right? Instead of having to bootstrap the entire Jakarta EE container for every single use case. You can bootstrap just the JMS message, for example, to just say, hey, all I really want to do is read this one message or read this sequence of messages, or all I really want to do is send this message out. You shouldn't need to bootstrap the entire Jakarta E container for that. Right? So this is the use case for that. It's similar to what was done for Jakarta REST in Jakarta E10, thankfully, right? They also have a bootstrap API to just spin up Ajax REST runtime, and that's it. Jakarta Security is another one of those interesting ones, right? There's a lot of, it's a vehicle for doing a lot of important stuff that's relevant to the platform. One of the one is JWT alignment. It is happening. I was really hopeful it was going to happen in the Jakarta 11 timeframe. It has not, unfortunately. Right? But the work here is to either make sure that Jakarta Security works well with microprofile JWT, right? And you can use it sensibly in a Jakarta application, or frankly just re-standardize JWT, either way. Right, we do need to figure out a solution for users, because anyone that is going to be using something like OpenID Connect and JWT together, well, they're going to have a gotcha moment. Similarly, the roles allowed run as annotation, talked about before, again, bound to EJB only, doesn't make any sense why that is, right? You ought to be able to use it anywhere CDI is capable. This specification could be a mechanism for making that happen, is to have a more modern take and allow these annotations to be used anywhere. EL enables authorization annotation. Again, this has been in the backlog for a while, literally even prior to the Jakarta 8 release. I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to breeze this over. A few of these things you can, I think it's self-explanatory, right? Really what this is doing, as you know, if you're writing declarative security for an application, a lot of the times the role-based security is just not enough. It's not robust enough to just say, hey, please allow access if you have this role. Sometimes you need a little bit more, something a little bit more robust, something that looks a lot like business logic. Now, you can actually make it such that you can still use it, do that in a declarative way. How? Well, we have this nice thing called EL that's very powerful, right? So if you combine annotations with EL, you can't completely eliminate the case where you have to write your own interceptors and write complex business logic, but you can eliminate some cases, right, where that's no longer necessary, right, by using something like this. Okay, Jakarta configuration. This is honestly a big one. I'll explain to you in a moment why this is a big one. So there are many use cases in Java EE where it remains the case that if you want to configure something, it has to be an XML. Okay, so WebXML is one example of that. Application.xml is another example of that. Persistence.xml is another example of that. And this is very out of date, as we talked about, right? This is XML. If you're talking to a Python developer or Node developer, and you tell them, please go configure this XML, they're going to tell you, what is this, right? What century is this technology from, right? So we need to fix this problem, and number one, for that reason alone, right, to be able to get away from XML configuration and have something that does look more modern, and property files is a fairly common one in those type of languages, and so should be it for us. The other use case is when you do have microservices-based systems, often configuration is shared. In fact, in a cloud environment, if you want to do configuration in a secure way, it shouldn't even be in text format. It should actually be in secure cloud storage. So you cannot do those things unless your configuration can be externalized, which you cannot do in XML. Literally, you're putting in the configuration residues embedded within the application in XML. And this is a problem that we have solved effectively, right, in microprofile configuration. And it does a yes, could it be better? Probably, right? But does it do the job? By and large, it seems so, right? The problem is that's sitting in microprofile. So if you want to standardize, if you want to modernize, say, Jakarta persistence, well, and you want to reference microprofile, guess what's going to happen? You're going to wind up with a circular dependency, because microprofile in turn actually depends on Jakarta. So it's a very odd situation. So the solution to this is Jakarta configuration. And mostly it's about taking a look at microfile configuration and standardizing it in Jakarta E so that the thing can be used and can be applied to Jakarta E. This has been now almost 3 years since the spec was created, and there hasn't been a release. Right? So this is another area where some help is obviously needed. Right? But the use cases are something like this. I won't, again, running out of time, I'm going to skip this over relatively quickly. One is, hey, you have a value injected in your application somewhere. You do that via annotations at @inject. Yet another one, as I mentioned, is replacing all these XML files and being able to configure the same things in more compact fashion in either YAML, if you prefer, or more likely properties, right? That's what, again, most of these Python and Node folks, this is what they're doing. And even if you are using XML, you ought to be able to externalize some of those configuration values also, right? Even if you somehow prefer XML or it works for your particular situation, you can still you ought to still be able to say, okay, this part of the configuration actually resides outside, right? It's not embedded within the XML itself. Yes, sir. Yeah, exactly. That was the intent. Yeah. Okay. Jakarta NoSQL, this is actually a standalone specification, and I'm actually somewhat convinced that it should remain that way. Right? This is basically a standard for accessing. This is basically JPA for NoSQL databases. Well, my good friend Otavio actually has been working on this thing for a while. It's in relatively good shape. Right? Basically, it has taxonomies. It can handle multiple different types of NoSQL databases. In fact, I think JNoSQL, which is, if you will, a reference implementation, that actually supports more NoSQL databases than anything else that I've seen out there of a similar nature. So relatively mature. The holdup of actually having a final version of this thing is, again, not having a Jakarta config. Right, so it cannot be actually finalized because it has a dependency on it wants to do configuration in a modern way. Here's a quick example of it. I'll just breeze this over. This is all literally, I'm copying and pasting this from the Jakarta NoSQL documentation. You could take a look at this. I think it's usable as is, right? It's in fairly decent shape. And as I mentioned, me personally, I'm not convinced it actually needs to be in the platform. I think it could be in a shape where it goes final, it remains a standalone specification, but it is in a place where you can easily drop a jar file and it just works, right? And it just integrates with the platform in a seamless way. The same can be said of Jakarta MVC. Back in the Java EE8 days, I was convinced that we needed this in the platform. But since then, what has happened is that the ecosystem has changed, right? So I'm no longer convinced that, yeah, again, we should add this in the platform. The reason being that I'm not sure that server-side Java is a thing anymore, right? To be perfectly honest, me personally, I like JSF, but I'm in the minority. Right? The vast majority of applications these days, they are just using Java as a RESTful services backend, and then they're doing their front end in something else, typically JavaScript, right? So. But this is basically a action-oriented take on JSF. It's similar to something like this. If you look at the API, it makes a lot of sense. Again, it's already, I believe this one, MVC is actually final 1.0. It may have actually been, I don't really remember, they may have point releases after that as well. So this is literally a copy and paste from that documentation, more or less, right? So this is basically almost like JSF, right? It gives you sort of the JSF-y feel when you're writing your backing beans. The difference is that your front end doesn't make those assumptions, right? When your template language doesn't really make assumptions about framework life cycles and so on, right? It almost just looks like, hey, you have a RESTful web service, and then you put a sort of an HTML in front of it, and that's about it. There are many other things, right? I could go on and on, and hopefully we will have a revision of the Jakarta E12 contributor guide, and we'll include some of these things there. I'll skip these over for now. Basically, the one is It's an observation that you don't actually need a persistent.xml, right? If you have a database configured and you're using JPA, well, you could just make the inference that you need a Jakarta persistence configuration. You could surmise what that is, right? You don't have to explicitly create it. Jcache, I think this needs a little bit more explanation, so I'll skip this one over. This is how the gap that I mentioned before, where Jakarta REST, or rather JSON binding doesn't actually support records. This is how that would look like, right? In practice, if you did this, it's actually not work. You'll wind up with empty results because JSON binding doesn't recognize the fact that a record doesn't have getters and setters anymore. It expects to getters and setters. It's a really small change to make, actually. This is how a job definition API might look like. Again, literally just copy and pasting what's in the Red Hat implementation. Would be very easy to standardize. This is one of the things you could pick up. Literally, you could just probably copy and paste the work and say, and do a release and say you're done. Right. So this is an easy one. Okay, this is what we have envisioned for a while to replace probably the most popular EJB annotation at stateless. Okay, probably most people that are using EJB, this is the annotation, single letter annotation that they are using. You could easily envision something that does very similar to what that does as a built-in stereotype. Okay, so what would this built-in stereotype have? Well, it would have a scope. Probably the most sensible one is going to be application. By default, it needs to be transactional, just like our stateless is. By default, it needs some kind of locking semantics. So maybe by default, we assume that it's a read-write lock, and you place a write lock when you actually need concurrency semantics. It could have a concurrency throttle. Vendors could add additional capabilities just like they do for EJB, right? If you have an EJB, it's actually automatically monitored. Right? If you go into the application server console, it will tell you a little bit about the EJB usage. You could have similar vendor-specific functionality built into it. So this is how at service potentially could look like, and you could have a drop-in replacement of EJB stateless, more or less. Skipping this over, again, you could easily envision that there could be a Bootstrap API for Jakarta EE that is just as simple as that. You just have a public static void main method, you just call Jakarta application.run, and it does the rest of it for you, right? You don't have to start up a container and do a var deployment and so on and so forth, right? Okay. So there is other work. If you're not particularly keen on doing the specification work, which, by the way, I'll tell you, like, it is not as scary as it may sound, right? If you want to do some of this work, yes, it's going to take you a little bit of time to get started, but you could do it. If you're a reasonably competent developer, you could do a lot of this work, especially if you get some help from the project teams. But let's say you don't want to do that, right? There's actually a lot of work that is non-specification work in general. It's a characterization, broad characterization. In general, this is easier to do, right? So you can take a look at some of these things. How do you do that? Well, these are the steps, right? Get on the mailing list, same thing as any other open source project, really. Same sort of steps. Get on the mailing list, ask for a feature using the GitHub repo, sign some kind of agreement. In this case, it's called the ECA. It literally takes a few minutes to sign. And then make your PR, and if you need help, well, guess what? You can reach out. You can find somebody that is a Jakarta EE ambassador, and they'll help you figure out all these things. Okay. So summarizing all of this, basically, we're all happy that Jakarta EE hasn't vanished, right? So we've at least had 10 release that had features in it, 11 hopefully releases, but this is only the beginning, right? So it's not everything is honky-dory, and the only way it is going to be is if you get involved. And that was, if you take away one thing, do please take away that thought with you, is like you are needed, right? So the way to make this stuff successful is if you get contributed, get involved, and actually make it happen. And you can do that right at this moment. You can get off the video you're watching today, you can get out of the room and make a decision that this is something you want to do. Okay, this is some resources I'll leave you here. By the way, this slide deck is already on my speaker deck account. I made it available, like, I think Friday. So yeah, you don't have to wait for the conference to publish this deck. You can just go look at it right away. Okay, photo that actually one of the ambassadors took, so it's a nice place to finish the talk. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope this was worthwhile, and I hope to see you around.